Hi, everybody. Welcome to Films and Stuff. I'm Ethan.
And I'm Pete.
Okay, let's kick it off today, Pete. What do you got for us? What's on the agenda? What have you been watching recently?
So I've been watching a couple of different TV shows. I haven't started yet, and please forgive me, I haven't started yet on Yellowstone, although that's queued up and ready to go.
I'm not offering forgiveness, but I appreciate your confession. I appreciate the
All right,
confession.
fine. I will strive towards redemption in that case.
I don't know what you think this is, but there is no forgiveness.
Fine. I'm going to work on watching Yellowstone. I still haven't seen it yet, although the premise of rough and tumble Kevin Costner is always an attractive premise to me. So I will watch that, but the reason I have a good reason, the reason I haven't watched that is because I have been absolutely enamored by For All Mankind, a recommendation you gave a couple weeks ago.
I did give it. And it was a good recommendation at the time, but I have to say there is also something very fulfilling about giving a television recommendation meets or exceeds expectations. So I have to say I'm thrilled that you liked it. And how far are you? I mean, this is there's multiple seasons. Where are you?
So there's two seasons out at the moment.
Okay.
I've finished the first
season. This is a good place to start.
I finished all of the first season in like 3 days. I couldn't stop watching it. I loved it. I thought it was very good. And I'm excited to see what happens with season 2. And if season 2 goes well, I'm very much looking forward to season 3 coming out next year.
So let me ask you a question for our listeners who have not seen this, and even for those who have. Would you classify For All Mankind as a sci-fi series, as a historical political series, as a drama? How would you position it?
Yeah, that's a great question. You know what it is? It's one of those sci-fi in the sense that the premise itself is relatively futuristic even for today's date, even though this is set in the 60s and 70s, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I would say it's a mix of sci-fi, but I would also say it's a mix of like alternative history. So if I remember correctly, and please don't quote me on this, there's a show called The Man in the High Castle.
Yes, correct.
And I haven't seen it yet either, but I believe the premise of that was, what if the Germans had won World War II instead of the Allies?
Correct.
Right? And so that's in a similar vein. I find that For All Mankind follows that path, which is to say, look, let's take something that's an established historical fact and let's twist it or shift it up a bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And just for our listeners who have not come across For All Mankind, it is based on the U.S. Soviet Union space race and reimagines history where instead of the United States with the Apollo program being the first to land on the moon, it was the Russians and their space program that landed on the moon first. And then it kicks off kind of a space race between the two countries. So, Pete, I mean, I think where you position this is exactly right. And I think it's why it appeals to both of us, which is it has a sci-fi element to it, but it's obviously based on, reality, right? They've taken a lot of historical events, repositioned them. Obviously, they've created some new technologies and imagined some things, and that's pretty cool. At the same time, this kind of gets away from a traditional kind of political thriller that, the United States and the Soviet Union, I think that's kind of like the backstory to provide an explanation for the reason that a lot of these things have happened. And then at the same time, it brings in a lot of, traditional dramatic elements, right? With different storylines, revolving around love, family, friendship, all those other kind of 7 deadly sins. So I think it's got a little bit of something for everybody. And again, one of the things that really appeals to me is that it's kind of based on reality, but it doesn't get too bogged down into politics because it's entirely reimagined.
And the politics that you do see is more aligned with pushing the plot forward than it is for the sake of politics, right?
Absolutely right. So I think that makes it pretty neutral, probably for anyone, worldwide audience, because it's really not focused on political events. It's just uses those as a justification for why these things are happening. It's more backstory than anything.
Exactly. And you hear the tapes and the voice recordings or the phone calls of Richard Nixon. And in every one of those phone calls, he comes off as, an arrogant dick. But to be fair, that's probably every world leader. So, it's relatable in the sense that what leader wouldn't be like that in similar situations, right?
Yeah, I agree. So tell me a little bit about your feeling about the casting. I think it's a cast that, as far as I'm aware, no one is really kind of like A-list. But if you go one by one, you can kind of say, oh, I remember this person from this role. They were wonderful. Or I loved them in this. I wanted to see more of them.
Yeah.
How do you feel about everyone who's casted?
So I think the casting was done very well. One of the things in general that I'm a big fan of, especially as I've grown older, like when I was younger, everything you wanted to watch, you wanted to make sure that, it had Sylvester Stallone in it or Arnold Schwarzenegger or some actor or actress that you knew that, you recognized because you were just like, that's how you kind of appreciated those things, right? You didn't look with a very critical eye.
Mm-hmm.
But what I think, for example, this show does very well is cast people who are relative unknowns. I'm not saying they're unknowns. I'm just saying that let's say in even the TV landscape and in the movie landscape, they're relatively unknown actors. All of them have done an incredible job because they're not bogged down with any baggage of previous roles. I'll give you an example. Joel Kinnaman, right? I've loved him for a long time. I saw him in the first experience I had with him was he's Rick Flag in both Suicide Squad movies. But more importantly, where I thought he was excellent was the main character Takashi Kovacs in Altered Carbon season 1.
What have I seen him in?
Altered Carbon's fantastic. It's one of my favorite shows ever.
Absolutely right. So yes, he is.
That is a great sci-fi show. And more than that, it's sci-fi and it combines with my favorite genre of movie, film noir. So Altered Carbon, excellent. And that's actually where Kinnaman got my attention.
That's right. I did remember seeing Altered Carbon. Maybe we need an episode on that one day, but you're right.
I think he played one of Kevin Spacey's guards. Or bodyguards.
Correct. I'm looking at his IMDb. He was also in House of Cards.
Oh yeah, that's Joel Kinnaman as well. He's in the reboot. Yeah. That's right. He's the rebooted RoboCop.
Yeah, I did not remember him from House of Cards, and I thought there was something else that I saw him in. RoboCop.
Look like real people.
Yeah. And actually, I think that this follows, there's something really interesting about this show and the casting, which is, if you look at the cast, obviously they're all very, very beautiful people, but they've kind of, I don't want to say uglied them up, but they've made them, it's not intended
supermodels.
Yes, it's not intended to be a show where, all these astronauts and NASA executives, look like they are, runway models. Yeah, they really... dress them in the period and, they give them haircuts and probably, the makeup is done in a way to kind of understate them, so some of the folks, Margot, right? Who's played by Ren Schmidt, who's, one of the NASA administrators, right? She looks like an executive, with the haircut and the glasses and you wouldn't find her, just the way that she's cast as to be, extraordinarily striking, but in real life, she's very, very pretty. Same thing for, Ellen, Molly Cobb, a lot of these people, they've done a really good job, I think, of, kind of making their natural beauty a little less outwardly and making them look like they fit the roles much better. So I find that a little bit refreshing. It's not intended to be, sometimes you find, let's not name names of shows, but shows about like law firms or lawyers or someone, and everyone's just stunningly beautiful, right? Extraordinarily well dressed and stylish and impeccable, and you say, this is very good for entertainment value, but in terms of having a strong relationship to reality, it's a little bit strained and unbelievable, right?
But they worked all night to bring up a one-page document that blows the whole case apart.
Absolutely right. One of the members that I do recall, you talked about Joel Kinnaman. I remember Sonia Walger, who who plays Molly Cobb, as being someone in Lost. Do you remember Lost?
I do remember Lost, but who was she in Lost?
She was Penny.
Okay, now we're talking about a show that I haven't seen in 15 years now. Good God. Okay.
Yeah, she plays Penny.
I'll take your word for it. I don't remember her in Lost.
Yeah, but she has extremely long hair. I mean, think about Lost. Lost is 2006 to 2010, right? I mean, that's a generation ago.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I thought that was very interesting. Jodie Balfour, who plays Ellen, had a role as Jackie Kennedy in The Crown.
Oh, okay. I did not know that, but all right.
I mean, they've really taken some very, very well accomplished actors and actresses, but from smaller roles, and then thrust them into some leading.
Which goes back to the point I was trying to make earlier, right? Is that they're all relatively well credentialed, but maybe not necessarily well known, or maybe not traditionally famous actors in Hollywood. And I think I think that's what a lot of people or a lot of studios are trying to do now, is because they recognize that maybe this is the way forward, right? If you look at, and I don't want to beat a dead horse, but look at Marvel. With the exception of like a couple of bad guys here and there, relatively speaking, Marvel has always tended to hire B tier or seemingly B tier or C tier actors for their roles, and then given them a platform to really propel themselves up. Which is, it's great because A, they're more focused on talent than they are on name. And B, I mean, as a business decision, it's way cheaper to hire a no name than it is to hire, Sylvester Stallone to play XYZ, right?
Absolutely correct.
Yeah, absolutely.
Correct. So let's dive into kind of the storyline of For All Mankind, right? So, I mean, overall, it starts a little bit, I mean, obviously, it builds off of history, right? And it jumps into the story season 1, where there's a surprise at NASA, right? The U.S. Space Administration, that finds that, the Russians have surprised everyone, surprised the world, really, by announcing that, in the coming hours, they're going to be landing a group of cosmonauts on the moon. And that kind of is the backstory for, this space race, where a lot more resources and attention and scrutiny are, put into, the NASA program and the astronauts and the executives, that we're first introduced to.
And is it just men? That's the twist, I think, that we see in episode at the end of 2, maybe 3. I can't remember. Right? Is that they're also sending up female cosmonauts?
I think 3.
Right, which drives the secondary plot of the first half of the season forward before they kind of become unified to say, okay, we're all astronauts now. It doesn't matter if we're men or women. We have a job to get done.
You're absolutely right. It's actually something that's kind of like ahead of its time, right? I mean, we've talked about, I guess, in this type of environment, the importance of the equality between, males and females. But really, this is something that's kind of been expedited a little bit, by the fact that, under these circumstances, the Russian space agency has, landed a female on the moon, right?
Yeah, I thought that reveal was brilliant, by the way, when you see, and sorry guys, once again, spoiler alert, as we're 20 minutes into the show.
Too late. Once again, too late.
Yeah, that reveal where you see at the end of the episode where you see the cosmonaut flip up her visor to reveal the face of this woman, everyone's jaws dropped. I didn't see it coming. I honestly didn't see it coming only because it was for an alternative history show. Yeah. It was so grounded in reality. Given the premise, it was still so grounded in reality. I was blown away by that. I was truly, it was one of the few surprises. It helped the fact that I didn't do what I normally do, which is, go to IMDb before I watch a show and see who's in it, which I'm glad I didn't do. Because, the moment you start realizing, whoa, there's a lot of crazy talented women here. What, they can't all be housewives, right? So
I think that's where the show really starts to get its legs, because if you watch the first, maybe it's 2 or 3 episodes, as you mentioned before that reveal, I found that the show was entertaining. Like I wasn't ready to give up on it, but I thought that it was following a little bit of kind of like a Mad Men, type storyline, and Mad Men was very much a period piece that preyed on kind of, the excesses of that generation, like the drinking and the womanizing, and, the woman was there to kind of like manage the household and being a supporting role. And there was obviously some drama and tension between the husband and wife. But, in terms of the office workplace, it was very much male dominated. And to be honest, until this reveal, I agree with you that I thought it followed kind of kind of the traditional formula for that era.
yeah, a quote unquote era appropriate.
Yeah, exactly. And that could be an interesting show in itself, to be honest. But I mean, I don't think it would have had the amount of passion that you and I have had for it if it would have kind of stayed on that trajectory. And instead, I think that it's because it changed so dramatically, right? And it immediately elevated women to kind of like the starring role of the series, that it became a little bit more interesting, because it also shows a lot of dynamics in terms of, the men wanting to continue to be the provider, retain or regain their dominance, and all these other like kind of complicated, situations that you have, when men and women are traveling to space together, right?
Right. And it also showed the flip side, right? Which is to
Mm-hmm.
say that, hey, guess what? Women have ambitions too. Hey, guess what?
Mm-hmm.
They're just as competitive, if not more competitive,
And talent,
and definitely
absolutely.
talented. The actor who plays Molly Cobb, for example, I'd put the character of Molly
Yep.
Cobb up against
Yep.
any of those other astronauts, male astronauts, and certainly based on how she acts in the
Mm-hmm.
last 30 minutes of the last episode of season 1, I'd put Ellen Waverly's character also in
Mm-hmm.
that same reign, right? Like that ending line where she relieves Joel Kinnaman of his duty, man, and knowing that she's going to
Yeah.
be left on the moon alone. I mean, that blew me away. That
Yeah.
was really
Yeah.
badass, right?
It's badass.
Because and it shows,
Yeah.
like at the
Yeah.
end of episode 1, where he was the one willing to take a bullet for
Mm-hmm.
his failures, she was willing to do the same for things that weren't her failures.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah, that's really a good element that you picked up on, which is there's a lot of, I would say, taking personal responsibility to, self-sacrifice for kind of the betterment of the mission or the team, which I think is kind of like a recurring theme in a lot of different episodes. We've seen that throughout, more than one character, actually.
like when the other astronaut breaks her
Mm-hmm.
hand. When she breaks her hand to prevent Gordo from
Protect Gordo.
to protect Gordo, because apparently psychiatry was still a bad omen back then.
Yeah. Do you find that this show is trying to send a subtle message in terms of, what could have been, and it's a little bit I don't want to say reminiscent, but it's a little bit like expressing disappointment or melancholy, for what's happened to kind of not just the U.S. space program or even the Russian space program, but kind of the exploration of space in general. That up to the involvement of maybe Elon Musk with SpaceX, Jeff Bezos with what does he have, Blue Origin,
Origin,
right?
yeah.
Maybe even who's our British friend with Virgin Galactic,
Branson.
Richard Branson with Virgin Galactic. Apart from those three entrepreneurs, the global space program has been a little bit on cruise control, with an international space station, with some missions, a lot of satellites, of course, which are unmanned, and the occasional news about a Mars rover or this rover or this type of thing. But generally, do you think that this show is expressing a little bit of like disappointment or melancholy into, what could have been had the world collectively, been a little bit more interested in space exploration.
My response to you is to say that I am not confident that the world in this show is interested in space exploration. Everywhere you go, every turn you take, every motivational factor, every driving factor is we have to beat the Russian. There's no inherent I want, except for the guy who designed the Saturn V, the German guy, right? Who at the congressional hearing says, but this is the stepping stone for us to go to Mars and beyond, and convinces the congressional audience, right? Um, except for him, and we don't know what the Russians' motivations are because we don't meet any of them until the last episode. We don't, every motivational factor, even at NASA, and its directors, because they're all appointees of Nixon or Kennedy, is we are interested only in being in space so that we can beat the Russians.
That's interesting that you said, because I feel like there were two, there was one missed opportunity, and then there was one just kind of lazy reference. And the missed opportunity, I think, is Alida, right?
Right.
Alida, I thought when she was first introduced, was going to be, the young Mexican, immigrant who was inspired by these events that she saw on television, was going to be this great, kind of savior or addition. But to be honest, they kind of bungled her story, and I felt like they diminished her a little bit, kind of showing, some of her personal tribulations. Maybe that was to humanize her. But I felt like that was an opportunity, and maybe that would have been something I would have liked to see replicated, where you had this, generation of, students from around the world who were just like so, captivated, by this, that, they went into, all the different STEM disciplines, right? And it could have been this great springboard. And then I thought that I overheard one other conversation where, someone was introducing herself at NASA, and, one of the young, engineers said, oh, I joined NASA because of you. It's just kind of like, I wouldn't say a throwaway line.
There was the letterboard, yeah.
Yes, right? And
yeah.
And it just felt like, I thought this would be like a theme that was, maybe we'll see it in future, seasons, but I thought that
that's a good question. Have you seen all of season 2 already or not yet?
I'm coming to the conclusion of season 2. So
I mean, obviously I don't want to hear spoilers. But,
no, we respect spoiler alerts on this show. That's for certain. But I can tell you that it is at least as good, if not better. So it's definitely worth your while. It doesn't lose steam. It's at least as good, if not better, than what you've already seen.
So I imagine that they might touch, or I imagined that they would touch on more of Alida's story in season 2 and 3, or at least season 2. But I'm guessing from what you're saying, maybe it comes up more in season 3. But to be determined.
We'll see. No, to be determined. There's another theme which I think is captured a little bit better. But still not quite as much, which is like the different technologies, which have spawned out of the space race, right? I mean, in a few scenes, you see kind of like these ubiquitous boxes that are kind of like a Skype-like or Zoom-like, like video monitor or something, right?
Right.
So, I mean, they make some reference to things like this, right? I don't know. They don't obviously explicitly state internet or something, but obviously video conferencing is at least well advanced, right?
I mean, I'm not 100% sure on that in terms of, again, and I don't think that's one of the driving focuses or driving forces rather of this show.
Yeah.
I think they're more concerned with
Yeah.
let's say the drama of what's going on up there. And I imagine that's what's going to happen a lot more in season 2.
Yeah.
Or at least that's what I'm hoping for based on how season 1 ended. Given the way Joel Kinnaman's act behaved and, his presence overall, I was under the impression that season 1 was going to end in one of two ways. either he was going to go and befriend the Russians at the base because he was on his own, or he was going to start an intergalactic war. Right? That's just because there was that one scene where he destroys that listening device or whatever it is that they find that he finds in the mine shaft, and I just imagined that that's what was, because he was also under the immense pressure of what's going on with the death of his son. So I just thought that was going to be the breaking point for him, and to a certain extent, it was, but it wasn't as much as I thought it was going to go. I thought that the season was leading up to that.
Yeah, and following a traditional story arc, I think you're on the right path, and I don't know this, but I mean I'm also going to make like some kind of like assumptions or projections, which is there needs to be kind of like the protagonist and the antagonist, right? There seems to need something to galvanize the folks together or drive them apart.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
Whether in the future we do see that the tensions between the Russians and the Americans, increase, or potentially, an alternative, which is not uncommon, looking at the blueprint from Game of Thrones and some other folks, is that maybe there's going to be, a third country that enters the space race, whether it's, the Chinese or I don't know whoever else it would be, but someone else that kind of galvanizes the Americans and the Russians to forge, like a new friendly alliance by necessity, to kind of, defend what they've created so far. And they find themselves, like unexpectedly kind of like on the same side, right? It seems like there's going to be one type of catalyst, one way or another, to drive them apart or to push them together.
Yeah, I agree. Because the whole point was up until episode 9, up until episode 10, the antagonist was this faceless, generic blob known as the Russians, right? The Soviets. There was no specific person, and that can only work for so long, right? In terms of television, in terms of movies, in terms of drama. It's the same thing I was saying a couple episodes back, is that at some point you need to be able to put a face to the bad guy or to the driving force, or you need to put, it can't just be some amorphous concept, right? And that's not to say that the state of Russia is an amorphous concept. It's a real deal. But in terms of a personal drama, when you're up, my gut feeling is that, and based on what I've seen other astronauts in our world, in our real life say, the moment you go up in space and you see the whole world and you're up on the space station and you can see the world revolve underneath you, I can't help but imagine that, man, the ideology of good countries versus bad countries, that's got to go away, because you start seeing the bigger picture, right? You start recognizing, man, there has got to be a lot more to our life than me worried about what's going on politically with another country.
I mean, you would think, but that's an interesting point that now makes me think about whether there's an Easter egg or a clue involved, which is the name of the NASA, what would you call it? The site? Yeah. The little lunar bases.
Jamestown?
Right? Is called Jamestown.
Yeah.
Jamestown being, I guess, a reference. You and I have to draw deep into our history here, but I guess that's a reference to like the British colonial settlement in the United States.
That's right.
Right? Named after King James, right? Not LeBron James. That eventually led to the American Revolution, right? So is this also by using that name, which could just be for convenience, but I mean, do you think this is telling us something about what we're going to see in the future as well?
That they're going to break off and splinter away from the U.S. and from Russia and become the third party,
or alternatively, whether the Russians or the Americans start to become free agents and say, hey, the Russian space program looks pretty good. Like you said, I'm in this for the big picture, right? I want to be supported as an astronaut or a cosmonaut. The other side seems to be doing better. Why we have these arbitrary, distinctions, based on country? Why don't I be an astronaut or a cosmonaut for the other side? So that the Jamestown name is
That's what I was hoping for. That's what I was really hoping for in terms of the resolution, or not the resolution, but the first meeting between Kinnaman and the Russian guy, right? Was I was hoping that there would be some form of, or some, like, you could see them kind of go at peace towards the end. But, and obviously he was a bit antagonistic because of what was going on in his personal life. But they did seem to patch things up at the end of the day. But I'm hoping that they explore that more. And, I get why he wouldn't disclose that, because, he automatically becomes a man of suspicion, right? If he does that. What I'm surprised by, or maybe he did and we just don't know about it, is he doesn't say anything to Waverly when he takes off and she's on her own.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I have to say, like, it seems like he's internalizing a lot of stuff, and I'm wondering if this is something that comes back. If there's a secret here that we're not aware of, right? But I
Like,
feel
there's
like,
plenty already being internalized and hidden, right? Like, you have that subplot of people who are gay and can't show it because of the era. So you already have that play in there, which, I mean, I get it. It's an important thing to say. How necessary, or how much does it really add to the story? Maybe not so much. Maybe there's a little bit of more, influence of the current political climate in the U.S. Going for it.
I mean, I think there needs to be a little bit of manufactured drama on the Earth side. I mean, the Moon side, I think, leads to a lot of kind of like cat and mouse
Yeah,
intrigue, but just from like a setting perspective, I think that the cinematography has been beautiful on the Moon. There's gray, obviously the surface, and then the very white, American spacesuits, the kind of like pinkish
that's right.
Russian spacesuits, and the visors are silver and gold. But apart from that, it's a very bleak, environment where obviously there's no grass, there's no real scenery. So I think there's just a limited amount that they can do on the Moon, and therefore they have to create a little bit of like domestic drama back on Earth to kind of always find a way to kind of pull it back, to those storylines, because I'm not sure that yet there's enough to kind of like really carry things on the Moon, because on the Moon, as we've seen with kind of Gordo, it's a little bit dull, right? I mean, they're stuck in a very small place. There's a lot of kind of menial tasks to do. There's not a whole lot you can do. You're basically eating and sleeping and doing personal hygiene all in the same, like, very
And
small
watching the same
space.
6 episodes of
Yeah,
the Bob Newhart show.
yeah, yeah. So it was. I thought it was. I just feel like there's limited, or at least maybe not yet. They haven't really opened up the Moon as the center of the show yet, and therefore they've got to kind of manufacture something back on Earth that pulls it back into the domestic drama.
I thought that when the ship blew up, the launch pad, on the launch
Yeah,
pad, I
yeah,
thought that's where
yeah,
they were gonna go. I thought they were gonna go with espionage on the ground. I thought that the KGB
yeah,
was involved. My initial thought was
yeah,
immediately the
yeah,
KGB's involved, right?
yeah,
I thought that it was going to
yeah,
be and then I thought, oh man, this is going to be a great B plot. Is then you have a series
yeah,
of like U.S. operatives who get introduced, who then go to Moscow and become sleeper agents and try to infiltrate. Then it becomes a full-on spy, Then it becomes a full-on spy movie, a spy show.
yeah.
Than it does. It becomes almost too exciting, I think.
That's Pete. I really want to applaud, because that's a point an angle I didn't see coming. And you're right, that now when you play it out like that, that kind of seems like a lost opportunity, that you could have also kind of have like a third good storyline, and you could kind of have the domestic issues. Then you could have, obviously, the space related or NASA issues. But then, yes, you could have had kind of this cat and mouse espionage game, and I really kind of like that third prong, because I feel like right now we've got two prongs, which are both interesting and compelling. To be honest,
Less
I find the
compelling.
domestic a little bit less compelling. Although we need it, to kind of keep the characters. But again, there's nothing really unique about this level of drama. Whether it's a son's death or infidelity or these little bickerings between families. That's all well and good, and to be honest, I mean they've done it really well from a writing perspective and acting perspective. But that's not why I'm tuning into the show, right? I'm tuning into the show for the space and for those different scenarios. But I agree with you. I feel really strongly now that this was a lost opportunity to have kind of a third story arc, and one that I think would have been like super, super interesting as well.
Because, like you rightly pointed out, everything that's happening on Earth, I think, happens to ground the entire series, right? Literally and figuratively, right? Is to say that, look, the point is that we may be a pseudo sci-fi show about setting up a moon base and trying to beat the Russians in a race. But, we also want to appeal to the other 30, 40, 60% of the people of our audience by saying that whatever the number is, to say that, oh, we've also got a wayward son. We've also got, a lesbian couple with a man who's gay. And the problem is everything on Earth is kind of getting muddled to one, right?
Yeah. So Pete, can I ask you that? I mean, is that the way? I mean, let's make sure this is not a tangent, which we are apt to do, but is that the right way to position a show in your opinion? I mean, if you're a science show, should we be all in on the science? I mean, if you think of some of the other like successful shows that, we've loved, right? And I'm kind of thinking back to Breaking Bad, or Sopranos or something like that. Were these shows loved because they brought in these domestic issues, or were they loved because they focused on the real subject matter that we wanted more of? And I'm not sure, is that the right formula where you throw a little bit out to your 60% audience to kind of keep them interested in the love triangles and the family drama, and this person has a personal life secret? Is that what we want? Or are we just kind of suffering through that, and it's kind of like a montage just because we don't have enough material, to make 5 seasons about space?
I think if it's done well, I have no problem with it. Like if keeping secrets, like talk about Dick Whitman in Mad Men, right?
Oh, yeah.
We didn't know anything about his past. We get to slowly unravel that, but I was all in because that was exciting. Right, you got to.
That was a secret.
That was a secret.
Yeah.
You get to peek behind the curtains of what makes Don Draper Don Draper. Right? Is Don Draper really Don Draper? What I like about that subplot was that it added to the character of the guys that we were really interested in.
Well, then you know what they really had. Now that you say that, now I feel like there was really a lost opportunity in episode 2. Right, where we talked about who was the director of NASA. As you mentioned, he was a German gentleman, right, who eventually lost his position because they positioned him, rightly or otherwise, as like a former Nazi, or member of the SS, right? Is this something that would have been better kept a secret, where he was manipulated by a few people, whether it's politicians or otherwise, who kind of knew his background and forced him to kind of do some stuff that maybe wasn't in the best interest of NASA, or was in their best interest, that wasn't, what he wanted to do. Now you're getting back into the third prong, which is kind of the espionage, spy, game within a game type, plot. And I think that now, when you mention it, that was another lost opportunity. That would have been a super interesting thing if you've got this guy who's making some berserk decisions because someone's holding something over his head, or because of his background, which is not what everyone thinks that it is, correct?
They tried to show elements of secrets, and they tried to show elements of these subplots, right?
Yeah.
Like with Margot's dad actually having worked on the Manhattan Project, which is great. Don't get me wrong; it's a great reveal. But does it add anything to the story? Does it add anything to the? For me, not at all. It adds nothing to the character of Margot, who already to me has shown limited growth, at least in season 1, right? You see her towards the end trying to change her cardboard exterior to be a little bit more inclusive with everyone, especially with how they're trying to handle the situation with the runaway spaceship. But I think that for all intents and purposes, a subplot like that becomes
Yeah.
interesting if it A shows character growth, or B is actually like a secret or surprise that drives the whole story, right? And I think that it doesn't do that. I think that most of the plots here don't do that, and would For All Mankind have benefit from a third plot? For me, yes, only because the stuff that's happening on Earth isn't compelling. Right? The stuff, or let's make it very clear. The stuff that's happening outside of NASA's purview isn't super compelling. I'm not super worried about, Gordo going to
Yeah.
psychotherapy and dealing with the fallout. I'm not super worried. Even the whole thing
Hmm.
with who's
Yeah.
the black astronaut, whatever her name is, and her husband coming back from Vietnam, Danielle, and her husband
Yeah.
coming back from Vietnam,
Yeah.
and they haven't really
Mhm.
touched upon it, but this is in the same time frame of the civil rights movement
Yeah.
in the US, so they haven't really discussed that. A little bit here and there, they've made some implications, and of course, nobody wants to get too political, right? And I can understand why the show wouldn't want to get too political either, right?
I think you've just made a very good, maybe this is your unintentional hot take of the day, which is secrets are good and should be used only for the audience so that they can understand
Mm-hmm.
why some irrational decisions are being made. But just having a reveal for the sake of the reveal doesn't really add anything to the show. It's kind of a wasted opportunity. And if you contrast this, okay, I'm going back to Breaking Bad and Sopranos, two of the most beloved series ever, right? The reason those domestic issues I think were so interesting was that both of those premises were, a New Jersey gangster, right? Hey, he's just like us. He's got the same, like domestic concerns about taking out the garbage and his misbehaving kids, right? It was endearing because that's what the show was, which is gangsters have the same type of stuff that they have to deal with. Similar with Breaking Bad, which was, this is just a guy trying to pay the bills, deal with his wife and, their day-to-day stuff. And he has this secret life, right? Again, the secret that the audience knows, which is, he's a meth dealer or manufacturer, right? So I think those two domestic scenarios were embraced, because of the juxtaposition, is that the word? Between kind of their real jobs, their secret real jobs, and what, the rest of the community kind of saw them as, which is For All Mankind, they're outwardly astronauts or NASA employees and so forth. So the domestic issues are really not necessary to the storyline or not really saying anything. It's just, trying to draw us into like a traditional kind of family drama.
Which is not bad at all, because again, it serves a very valuable purpose,
Yeah.
which is to say, hey, look,
Yeah.
we can't be a show
Yeah.
about space 59 minutes out of 60, right? We need to also show
Yeah.
you you also need to see the on-ground drama that's happening, or the on-ground life that's happening.
Yeah.
Not even drama. It's just life, right?
Yeah.
At that point.
But it doesn't lead to anything. I think that's maybe my disappointment. Despite my love for this, these secrets don't lead to any behavior which is relevant to the space program. I think that these secrets would have been better.
My God, the
used that
Soviets
way.
find out that the Nate
Yes.
Cordry guy is gay. Have physical
Yes.
proof that the FBI doesn't.
Yes.
They approach him at one of
Yes.
his things and say,
Yes.
by the way,
Yeah.
we need XYZ blueprints and we need to know your
Absolutely.
plans.
Absolutely.
Or guess what? We're going to the
Absolutely.
FBI with this information. You know what I mean? And then likewise you have, and then on the flip side, then you infiltrate. Then you have you have the CIA operatives who are working in lockstep with the FBI, who are infiltrating the sleeper cells there. Or that they've uncovered the identity of sleeper cells in Florida or Texas or wherever they are. And, they figured it out.
Yes.
Oh my God. We've got a cabal of secret Russians here. We need to figure them out. We need to sort them out, and we need to turn them. Or, something like that. That's all, A, grounded in reality because all that kind of stuff has happened before, right? And B, it's equally, if not now, more compelling than what's going on this gray landscape of Moon, right? Because at the end of the day, what are these 3 astronauts, or now 1 astronaut up in space, going to do against the mighty Russian Empire, right? Which is why I thought that there was going to be more of a, let's say, a conflict rather than an uneasy, like a standoffish, what do they call it? Like a Mexican standoff kind of situation, right? Which is effectively what's happening on the Moon. So now, again, all the drama that you're seeing right now is not on the suspense is coming from mishaps in the program. It's not coming from let's say, directed actions, right? There was a fault with the engine, or the computer, and that's why this ship has gone haywire. Okay, that's great. That's a good manufactured source of tension for me as the viewer. But there's, how many spaceships? It got to be a running joke even amongst them in the show, right? It's been delayed another 2 weeks. How many spaceship failures can you have in one season or in one series before even the audience is like, oh, okay, well, that's just another plot contrivance, right?
Yeah. What do you think of the depth of the characters? And what I mean by that is, are there enough characters that we get to know? I mean, some shows, for example, Game of Thrones, is maybe the mod, but Game of Thrones is very good at suddenly introducing, a new family and a new character, and relying on them, and you got to know them and like them or not like them, and then, they kind of died off, but Game of Thrones was very good at introducing new characters all the time. Sopranos revolved around the same few characters. Rarely were they, getting killed, but they did. Same thing with Mad Men. More or less, the same group with a few, additional introductions or people taking prominence from time to time. What's your feeling about, this cast? Is it enough? Is it too many? Do we feel like we really know kind of folks? From the male astronaut level, we know Edward, right? Joel Kinnaman. We know Gordo, who we love. We kind of know Deke, the administrator. That's it for the male astronauts, right? Am I missing anyone? From the women, we know, 2 wives, 2 astronauts, and an administrator. Am I missing anyone?
No.
Is that enough? Is that enough? Do we need more?
We either need more or we need more sustenance to the ones we have. So, for example, Nate Cordry's character, except for the fact that he's gay and in a fake relationship with Ellen Waverly, what do we really know about him, right? Larry, just your average Joe Blow, right?
We don't know anything about, this is Larry we're talking about, and just like the name Larry kind of says, he's just kind of
they're covering each other's up.
Yeah, he's there just to provide a little bit of background, and explain some details. But I agree, we don't really know anything about his job, his role, his background, likes, dislikes. We know that he's, a closeted gay man who's in a fake marriage, with a closeted, gay woman, to kind of, as a measure of convenience for both of their careers, right? Which is actually a very sweet kind of storyline in a lot of ways, if you focus on
incredibly so, because you saw that he actually cared for her, like when he gets the call in the middle of the night. And he was like, you need to be better than this. You need to be smarter than this. You're becoming sloppy. He's not saying that out of anger or because he doesn't like that she's a lesbian. He's saying that because he genuinely cares for her and he doesn't want anything to happen to her.
Like, it would be fun if they were a power couple, right? Like, they're not really a couple. They're not really Jay-Z and Beyonce in the sense that they're a real marriage, but they're a power couple marriage. And it would be interesting if they were kind of, pulling the levers, within the organization.
Which is why if we get more sustenance or meat to Larry's backstory, then it becomes, because she's now an astronaut, right? So in terms of let's say, the power rankings of this
Mm-hmm.
series, right? She automatically gets elevated to the A tier, right? Because
Sure.
you don't
Sure.
get to be an astronaut in the 60s
Yeah.
era space program without being a power, right?
Sure.
And she's proven that
Mm-hmm.
she's not just there as the token women, because all the women have proven that, right? Coming
Yeah.
down, Molly Molly proved it for the whole squad, but the whole squad has also delivered. So in that sense, great. But Larry is still kind of meh. We don't know anything. We don't know, like, if, and I don't want to harp on about this, but like, if he were the one who were leading the efforts of the anti-espionage against the Russians, right? All of a sudden, you've got a really interesting dynamic
Yeah.
to be able to say, hey,
Yeah.
this is,
Yeah.
my wife
Yeah.
is an astronaut. I am the one who's brought down the Russians. It becomes a little bit more interesting.
Well, that's actually one of the storylines that we've seen played out in real life. I can't recall the story, but it's the same thing where they tap Larry and
Yeah.
say, "Hey, there's a mole
Yeah.
within the organization who's been compromised. Find the mole, and
Right,
he's the
right.
mole, right? So he either needs to have a unsuccessful internal investigation, or he needs to finger someone else and say, "Hey, this was the mole."
This is getting dangerously close to
Yeah.
Red Notice territory
Right.
with The Rock. Let's
Yes.
quickly get away with
that. Check out episode 0003, everyone. But I agree that this is a great show. I mean, we obviously love it. We're spending a lot of time on it, but I mean, I think we also see that. I mean, maybe some of these things will be rectified in the future. Maybe there's a few twists that we're not aware of, but certainly when we read through the scripts, we could have found a few places where I think they could have made a little bit more intrigue and added some depth to the storyline, because it seems to be taking an arc which is certainly an amazing premise, and they've done it very well, but it hasn't really done anything too risky in terms of incorporating other.
Yeah, and I think we're only saying that because the B tier plot is relatively blah.
It comes from a place of love.
Yeah. I think that, if
Yeah.
the B tier plot
Yeah.
were a little cleaner or maybe
Mhm.
a little bit more exciting, like, okay, everyone's got a petulant son. Okay, great. The twist is that he gets run over by a bus, right? And that he dies. It's unfortunate, but I don't see how that's adding any, like, for me, that storyline is over now.
There's no production value. Yeah.
Right? Yeah, exactly, right? And even though the
Yeah.
kid, even though Gordo's kid admits that it was his fault and that all of this happened, blah blah blah, like, that storyline is over. So where do you go here? Yeah. Then there was a chance to explore a little bit about Molly's husband / partner / hippie husband, weed smoking guy.
By the way, I like him a lot. Can we just? I mean, I don't know who that is, but I have to say he went in a very short period of time, to me at least, from being a little bit annoying,
Yeah,
to someone who I found was actually very interesting, and I would have loved to see him have like a bigger role,
Yeah.
because I thought that he was a really interesting character.
I thought he was when she died, or when the kid died. I thought he was going to have a bigger role then, but like, they had 1 or 2 scenes and that's it, really.
I agree, and it's kind of interesting to see, Molly and that guy, right? Because he supported her very much, but you would not imagine him as kind of the alpha macho guy that Molly, the cowboy female astronaut, would be attracted to, right?
Yeah,
He was talking about like painting, to get his feelings out, and,
exactly.
self-medicating.
I think the sweetest moment was when they launched for the first time. The sweetest moment was when they launched for the first time, and he, in a panic, like, he's so nervous that he grabs Kinnaman's Edward's wife's hand. And I was like, oh man, bless.
Yeah.
Like, I really felt for him in that moment, because you saw
it was a little much though. They took him from being a little bit like, I thought they made him a little bit much, but they should have used him more, because that was a nice element to incorporate.
Yeah. And again, who knows what they'll do or won't do in the future. But again, it goes back to the point that we've been making, which is everyone's everyone's storylines,
Lost
or
opportunities.
almost everyone's
Lost opportunities.
storylines, especially of those on Earth, very shallow. It is not. It is. If it were a pool, there would be a sign that says "Do not dive headfirst." Go on.
I was just gonna say, like, who's the creator of this?
I actually have no idea.
I'm seeing Ronald Moore and Matt Wolpert.
I don't know who any of these guys are.
Matt Wolpert is known as a producer of Fargo.
Great show.
The Umbrella Company. Okay. And
Umbrella Academy, excellent TV.
Yeah. And Ronald Moore, I'm seeing, is known for producer of Battlestar Galactica, Star Trek.
Okay. So he's the space guy. He's their space guy.
Space guy.
I think the other guys, are maybe more of the interpersonal and drama guys, but he is their space guy.
Yeah, actually, if you look at his work, everything is somehow space or science fiction related. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well done.
So he's the space guy, which is fine. I like that. Oh, he also wrote some of the episodes. Yeah, I think there's a lot of directions that this series could definitely go in. I'm excited to see what happens. I will watch season 2 over the next couple days.
Watch season 2, and then we can have a good chat after season 2. But I think after that, we should probably decide, where we're going to go after that, right? I mean, I think we've got a few other options that we wanted to focus on. I mean, I suggested Devs, and this is something I think you're going to take a look at. And you've recommended, remind me, please, what I'm supposed to be watching to catch up with you.
The Shrink Next Door.
The Shrink Next Door. And also Hawkeye.
And Hawkeye. I just found out that The Shrink Next Door was based on a real story.
I've heard that. I did not know that.
Yeah,
I did hear that.
Which makes the show all the more interesting to me.
Does it?
Yeah.
That means there must be a big crescendo somewhere. There must be a big crescendo, right? I mean, there would not be a real life story about just kind of like a psychiatrist, patient relationship if it was standard, right?
So it's been based on a true crime.
Yeah, there's got to be some type of like murder suicide or
something. Yeah. I don't know what the story is yet, and I don't want to find out. I want to see it through the show first. Okay. And then I don't want to spoil the endings as it were.
We do respect spoilers.
Because we're such fans of spoilers. And it gives me hope, because if they're based on a podcast, who knows? Maybe season 3 and 4 of For All Mankind will get invited to write. I'm just saying, we're putting it out there.
I would not say no.
I would say yes. I wouldn't even bother going through the steps of not saying no. I'd just say yes right now.
Do you like my double negative? Yeah. Yours is a lot easier to follow. Yeah. Let me clarify for my friend Ethan.
I don't not like it.
Let me clarify what my friend Ethan is saying. He's saying yes. I'll translate. I'll do Ethan the English translation. Yes.
Yeah. We're in.
What else do our listeners need to watch for upcoming episodes?
For upcoming episodes, we strongly recommend you watch and finish Foundation, which is quite possibly one of the best sci-fi shows I have seen I don't want to say ever, but
I think that's worth repeating. I really think that's worth repeating. You and I watch an extraordinary amount of television and cinema, and I think the fact that Pete says it's one of the best sci-fi shows that he's ever seen. I mean, this is a man who has T-shirts for probably every Marvel character. Is it fair to say?
Well, close.
I mean, you are legitimately a super sci-fi fan, as am I, but I think even not to your level. For both of us to think that Foundation is exceptional sci-fi, definitely fodder for another episode, but I think that's a very good recommendation that we can give. So let's put it out there for our listeners to catch up on Devs, and for you as well. For All Mankind, we'll try to do season 2, Hawkeye, and Foundation.
Indeed.
Okay.
And tune back in next week where we will be discussing Foundation.
I'm ready already.
So I'll give you a spoiler alert early now, but I'm sure we'll miss out on the spoiler alert next week.
This is a preemptive spoiler alert.
I'm just giving you the heads up now.
But listen to the episode anyway.
That's right.
Watch Foundation in advance. All of season 1. There's only one season, correct?
Indeed. Only one season, and I believe season 2 starts filming and is released next.
Whoa, like 2022? Like 2020?
Not sure. 2022.
Wow. Okay, so we're gonna need some listener suggestions in terms of what we can do to occupy our time between now and then, right?
If you want to get in touch with us, or if you have any questions, filmsandstuffpodcast@gmail.com. I'm not going to spell it out for you because they're all simple words.
That's true. No ampersand.
All right.
Okay. Thanks everyone for listening. I'm Ethan.
And I'm Pete. See you soon.
Thanks for listening to Films and Stuff. See you soon.